Good afternoon, Eric.
Good afternoon, Tyler.
How are you doing today?
Not bad.
On this day of debate.
I got one of your cat hairs all over my face.
We draw a topic out of the hat.
It's my turn to pick.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay. What will we be master debating today?
Feudalism.
Alright. Feudalism. Let's get a definition and then we'll take some research time here.
Okay.
You son of a bitch.
Whatever. It's not like we cleaned them up yet.
Oh my gosh.
What? I misspelled it.
Yeah, go ahead. My browser decided to update while we've been doing a fucking video, of course.
The dominant social system in medieval Europe in which the nobility held lands from the crown in exchange for military service, and vassals were in turn tenants of the nobles, while the peasants, villeins or serfs, were obliged to live on their lord's land and give them homage, labor, and a share of the produce, notionally in exchange for military protection. Huh.
Alright, so how do you feel about what kind of,
Wasn't this supposed to be about... I think when we did this, it was supposed to be about neo-feudalism?
No, there's another one for neo-feudalism too, I think.
Is there?
Which maybe might be a little redundant, but, let's, I say we get some research going and then we just kind of talk about it as we go and I'll cut it all together, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And then I guess we can decide whether or not feudal, how based, cringe, red-pilled, blue-pilled, genius, or stupid.
Black-pilled.
Black-pilled.
What is the black pill again? Isn't that how you become a doomer?
Pretty much. It's like everything is a conspiracy, I think.
I thought it was everything was fucked.
I don't know all the pills. I'm not a goddamn fucking pharmacist.
The black pill ideology is a fatalist set of beliefs held by members of the incel subculture.
Okay. So like doomer thirst.
Oh, the ADL calls it the extremist medicine cabinet, a guide to online pills.
Incredible. So just to start off with here, towards the top of the Wikipedia page, I'm just reading about so as like a definition, there is no like universally accepted definition.
Really?
And it has almost more come to be synonymous with like calling something feudalism than an actual specific kind of structure, you know what I mean? Like they'll say, oh, the feudal Japan or this institution behaves feudalistically or whatever, but in terms of actually applying as like a political definition for a certain kind of society, it's not so much commonly used even among like historical scholars and shit.
Huh.
Which is interesting. I didn't know that.
So it's basically just like lost all meaning.
Kind of. It's like some historians and political theorists believe that the term feudalism has been deprived of specific meanings by the many ways it has been used, leading them to reject it as a useful concept for understanding society. Which I think that came up, that topic came up in our centrism video when we were talking about just how overused shit like, well, the labels like fascist and shit are when you're just applying them to people who are like an asshole or whatever, but also even some psychological terms or whatever that we talked about. So some historians and political theorists are on our side some of the time with some words when it comes to being overused. Therefore, we were correct.
Yes. We're like the ultimate appealers to authority.
Yeah. But I also don't believe authority exists. If you have any authority, it is mere spookism, mere phantasm.
Right.
And it's a recent term too.
Really?
1820s to 1840, basically, is when the term popped up in all these different languages. French, Italian, English. It's coined by Adam Smith, basically.
Fuck that dude. No, I'm serious. I'm pretty sure that's the same dude who, like...
Yeah, it probably is. It's Adam Smith. Maybe the most, like, famous, I don't know how influential, but most famous, like, economic...
writers.
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck that dude.
We'll have to do one on Adam Smith at some point, probably. I'm pretty ignorant about Adam Smith in general, but what I do know is fuck Adam Smith.
He basically created economics, and I fucking hate it.
So before we get into whatever we're going to get into, I think it's probably a good idea to just like sort of define when we say feudalism, pretty much what we're talking about is like fiefdom, right? Like that's what immediately comes to mind. So you have, just in case you're unaware, and you didn't take like 6th grade history or whatever, whenever the fuck we first learned it, you had the king of a country or whatever, and then he would have, like, through ceremony, certain people would be appointed vassals, which are basically he would grant the vassals land, known as a fief, and then their land and the people under them would basically, if the king needed them to fight for him, they would, essentially.
Right.
And then depending on the time and the king and the country and all this other shit, the relationship between the kings and the vassals would differ. Sometimes they were like, if there was like a important decision, he would like summon them for council, or sometimes he didn't give a fuck and it's just like, pay your taxes, and when we go to war you gotta fight, and all that kind of shit. But that's that's like the groundwork idea of when we're talking about feudalism, I think, that first comes to mind, even though I don't know if that's universally how it was. Fiefdom specifically is kind of what comes to mind a lot of the time.
And I think a lot of what we think about is like English feudalism, because I don't think this was like much of a thing in much of anywhere except for
it's
France and...
What the fuck? I have like an issue. I got my coffee cup in my hand, and then now there's coffee on my hand and my pants. I'm getting coffee all over my entire body in this video.
Yeah, I guess.
I spilled something like 20 minutes ago, too. So now I'm just mad about spilling. That's all I can think about is spilling.
You gotta, like, chill. It's probably why you keep spilling shit.
I'm shaking with rage.
I guess.
Okay.
You want to know, like, one of the most interesting things one of the things I find the most interesting about reading about, like, the Middle Ages and stuff is the slow takeover of these, like, more regional languages over Latin.
Yeah.
Like the very slow replacement.
Mm. Yeah,
that's always kind of an interesting thing to me.
Yeah. So in this Wikipedia article, examples of feudalism, the biggest one is 12th century England. But also, they have 11th century France in some of the ways that it differed. Most specifically with France, apparently, I guess there was not written into contract or law most of the vassal relationships. So a lot of the time, it was possible for like a vassal to become more wealthy than another vassal and take over, or like even like usurp the original king and shit. Because there was no... generally, if they were powerful enough, even without contracts, they would do whatever the fuck they want, right? But there's even less incentive for, like, it to be stopped when there's no written agreement of any kind. The Roman Empire's got its own article.
Yeah, because it kind of started with the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
But...
apparently Portugal was originally a fiefdom. Like itself. That just became a country.
With its own language?
Yeah. After independence in the mid-1100s. A semi-feudal. This is interesting. I'm just reading the basic summary of, like, Russia.
Yeah.
What has been called Russian feudalism. They don't have a year exactly on, but I would imagine it's in the same period, like 800 to 1400, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. But they would have... there was no, like, central... because what would happen in like England and France and shit was that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Like obviously for the reasons that we described, it would be evident why it'd be mutually beneficial, but also like they were united as one kingdom or whatever, right? So
Correct.
the more vassals you had, as long as the vassals were loyal, you had, it increased your strength or your military might, or even just like your defensive capability, depending on where you'd be attacked from and shit. Whereas in Russia, there was like not as much. Like what would happen was there wasn't a great central power that was administering vassalhood and all these different.
No, there was a
plots
lot
land.
of like smaller,
and they would pop up, and then
Yeah.
the biggest one would kind of sometimes enforce it. But really, what would happen was that like if they got attacked from outside, they wouldn't ally because they weren't really allies. They were just
Right.
like almost
Until-
independent. So
until Ivan III, like unified all of the Russian states or whatever, right?
yeah, and then being a serf, I don't know
Yeah.
if we describe the serf. The serfs are the people that live in the fiefs, or the fiefdoms, right, under the vassals. So being a Russian serf was basically like, all right, I'm gonna trade you these 3 dudes for that cow.
Right.
Like your like if you had a family that belonged to the lord, like you
Right.
had literally no rights.
Yeah. I mean, like English and French serfs had it a little bit better.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Is they're a little? I mean, they're like had a little bit of human autonomy.
Right. You could literally run away and become free.
Yeah.
It's somehow. So I'm reading about like the fiefs.
Mhm.
Apparently, like discontent within the barony of of England is what resulted in the Magna Carta. Yeah, because of like reliefs and like feudal payments to King John. They're like, yeah, fuck this.
This
So
is
they made
bullshit.
they created the Magna Carta.
Magna Carta. We could probably do a video just on the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is one of the most based documents.
It's considered to be like this, like the second most important document in human history or something like that, right? I don't know. I mean, it's like they consider it to be, it's one of the most important documents in human history.
Just like as an influential word, like on all these other nations and stuff.
Yeah, and then like the U.S. Constitution is like right next to it. It's either like 1 or 2 is what people consider it.
Do you think this could be its own topic too in a Magna Carta video, but just the quick version? Like, do you think that the American Constitution being held in as high a regard as it is relatively related to like American exceptionalism? Like we're a newer country, and we like ascended to be a world power so quickly that it's held up in higher regard than it will be in like 300 or 400 years. I'm not even saying that it is, but
no, I wouldn't say
because
that.
it has been incredibly influential on like the foundation of every democracy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
like almost every democracy that's sprung up out has like basically adopted something similar to what we have.
Yeah. All right, modern. I skipped over a lot of these that would seem interesting just because I'm more ignorant about them, like China, Tibet. I know a little bit about the period known as feudal Japan, like Armenia, Indian feudalism. But a lot of these are also like we mentioned at the beginning, like it's not that feudalism is like some ever-present thing that like everyone is copying from each other. It's just that like it seems to be based on like the where the country and just the period of just the area of land is like in their cultural development. It just seems like it's almost there's something instinctual or natural about the way humans form societies that leads to something that is akin to feudalism. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would definitely agree
because
with
it's in all these different.
Because it just makes sense.
Yeah, but it's also important to like not pretend like they're all like the exact same. But it's interesting to note the commonalities, and that's what gets called feudalism, I think. You know,
Right.
Wait, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt what you're saying.
No, it just makes sense for. So there's one guy who's like super strong, right? He's got all this land. He's got all these dudes who he's got a reward for serving him, right? Well, I've got all this land. So why don't I just give them this land in recompense for them helping me be the dude, right? And so, well, there's already people living on the land. Well, he's now in charge of those people, so those people have to, like, pay him, and then he has to pay me. It's basically how, like, a corporation works, almost.
Yeah, kind of.
Like a company. You know, you got the one guy at the top, and then you got, like, your the manager staff, and then they're in charge of...
You get the board of directors, basically your parliament.
Right. We figured it out.
So apparently it took until essentially the 28th of November 2004 was when the Abolition of Feudal Tenure, etc. Act of Scotland 2000. So in 2000, then it took 4 years to become active, was what actually abolished like any traces of feudalism from Scotland. So literally fucking like 16 years ago.
Right.
Because before that, like the crown owned the land, technically.
Technically, the crown still owns the land.
Well, I just mean vassals could not own property.
Oh, right.
They would be doled property out.
Right. Yeah. Do you know that technically, like, the Queen still owns, like, all of England?
Yeah.
Yeah. Shit's fucked up.
Unique in England, the village of Laxton in Nottinghamshire continues to retain some vestiges of the feudal system, where the land is still farmed using the open field system. The feudal court now only meets annually, with its authority now restricted to management of the farmland. It's like this one village's farmland has feudal lords, basically.
Sweet.
And then...
So, feudalism in and of itself was not like a Roman invention. I mean, like, the idea of, like, giving out land was, you know...
Yeah.
But... So, there was no classical Latin word that existed for it. So they had to just, like, make one up.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, like that. It's almost like, it's kind of interesting because, tell me, this is a phenomenon that I've kind of noticed, but I've never really considered now until I'm reading about this in relation to, like, nowadays. But it's kind of funny because before, throughout most of human history, up until the last like 300 or 400 years, mostly, like the government would just be like whatever, right? Like the political system would arise out of like the will of the people at the top, and it varies across the world, obviously, but like now it's almost like. The world is not only a lot more homogenous, but it also seems like everyone... There's not people coming up with, like, new political systems that we should try out. Recently. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, the most recent is, like basically Marxism and all the spin-offs of Marxism that basically are a response to, like, industrialization and capitalism, right?
Pretty much.
But besides that, like, there's no... And a lot of these newer political ideologies, they come from one person or, like, one country that is, like, foundational to, like, it's the model, right?
Right.
So then you can judge another government by, it's 50% Marxist, or, you know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas, like, we historically, we look at them and it's like, well, they're all kind of feudal, but this one does this and this one does this. And it's not feudalism... Pure feudalism isn't a thing, really, but it's just it's like a descriptive term where almost political ideologies now are almost like prescriptive. Like, we need to be more like this abstract political idea this guy wrote about, where it wasn't like that for like all of forever until a couple hundred years ago. It's kind of bizarre. Like, it doesn't have to be that way, I don't think. I don't know. Maybe there's not that much freedom to come up with new ideas anymore. I'm not sure. Look at all these articles about English feudalism.
Yeah, I know.
Shit's no joke. I'm reading about
they're really out here.
And manorialism right now, which is like the small scale.
Oh yeah, I've got that open too.
Yeah. Basically, relating the relationship between like the actual small groups of peasants and the person who they support economically being termed a manor, and then all the different manors and shit make up the fief and so on and so forth. But actually, like, elements of the manorialism stuck around longer than feudalism just because it integrated more seamlessly with, like, the capitalist economic systems and shit like that, and market economies and private property and all this other shit. Where feudalism, the first big blow to feudalism was when, like, by 14 and 1500, most kingdoms were, like, it wouldn't just be nobles and noble families and stuff that would serve as the military. It would be, you would hire and train soldiers from your population. And it created a more effective military, but it also prevented, like, it basically freed the military up from needing to rely on, like, the feudalistic sort of system to function most effectively. Whereas obviously manorialism doesn't have that problem because it's way smaller scale. Just tell your boys to go grab their pitchforks, I guess. We'll burn this witch right quick.
Right. You can't forget about the role of the church in this whole thing too.
No. You can't forget the church forever.
Fucking for real.
I'm not saying we should bring feudalism back, but we should bring back feudal titles.
That would be so cool.
The liege lord.
I want to be, dude. I so want to be called a baron. That'd be so fucking cool.
The husbandman.
Yo, I want to be a vagabond.
I don't think you do. They're under the domestic servants.
Just don't have a job.
Between the slave and the domestic servant is the vagabond. I guess I do want to be a vagabond.
Yo, if you could be called the Lord Paramount, that'd be cool as fuck.
Lord of the Manor.
Oh my god. Sub-infeudation.
Whoa. What is sub-infeudation?
The practice by which tenants holding land under the king or other superior lord carved out new and distinct tenures in their turn by subletting or alienating a part of their lands. It's basically like, they pick a dude they really like and, like, give him some of their land.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, realistically, how much land do you want to have to, like, be in control of, you know?
Technically, probably as much as you want, as you like.
As you can, but at the same time, like...
Yeah, but you don't want to be, like, in charge of having to work it. You just want to, like...
Well, no,
this is my land, right?
I know, but you gotta... If your fief is too big, at some point, if there's somebody you can trust, it's the same thing.
Right.
As the king, you know? It's also another aspect of it that's beneficial for a king is that they have all this land, and it's like... Well, if I could formally break it up and then have one person to look to be its master or whatever, you know what I mean, then it frees it up from your end. Now you don't have to worry about fucking random-ass village as much as you just like, all right, what's up, vassal B or whatever, you know?
Right.
So it's the same thing with this sub-infeudation or whatever. It's like, I don't want to walk across town or whatever to see what the fuck's happening. I'll just get fucking Greg to do it. Greg will be my sub-infeud or whatever the fuck.
Huh. So, according to this, the Quia Imperatoris is a statute passed by the Parliament of England in 1290 during the reign of Edward I that prevented tenants from alienating their lands to others by sub-infeudation, instead requiring all tenants who wish to alienate their land to do so by substitution.
Substitution? Like put somebody else in charge?
Maybe, I don't know. So, this was apparently supposed to remedy land ownership disputes and consequent financial difficulties. This basically helped end feudalism in England.
Yeah.
And apparently, as of this year, the statute remains in force in England and Wales. Highly amended, of course.
Yeah.
but it was repealed in the Republic of Ireland in 2009.
So is that one of those where there's like some vestige of it that still affected shit, so they decided to get rid of it?
Yeah. Which I'm kind of surprised that the Republic of Ireland kept any laws passed by the English prior to, like...
Yeah.
I figured they would have just rewrote every law.
I would say those are their options, is just change it as we go, or just fucking whole scale start over. And I
thought they pretty much started over anyway when they became the Republic of Ireland. Of course, I don't know that much about, like, the formation of the Republic of Ireland, so...
And really, sort of the idea of describing all this stuff as feudalism came about, like we said, in, like, the 1850s, roughly. Right. And then, apparently now, I don't know, we saw a lot about feudalism in our textbooks, but Richard Abels notes that Western civilization and world civilization textbooks now shy away from the term feudalism. Or in a...
Must be a relatively recent development.
Yeah. As I say, but there's some criticisms of feudalism, like apparently one of the big ones was in 1974 from Elizabeth A.R. Brown. And Susan Reynolds expanded on Brown's thesis. Even when one restricts oneself to Europe and to feudalism in its narrow sense, it is extremely doubtful whether feudal-vassalic institutions formed a coherent bundle of institutions or concepts that were structurally separate from other institutions and concepts of the time. Basically, back to that. As a word, it almost has no unique meaning.
Right.
Proto-feudalism. I feel like we might as well just get into some of these fucking feudalism offshoots in this video.
Works for me.
Let's just do neo-feudalism first. Let's see it. In early use, the term was deployed as both a criticism of the political left and the right, but they don't cite their source, so I can't call whoever said that a centrist. Okay, so basically what I can glean from rudimentary research is that the term neo-feudalism is they're usually applying it to the very modern world in terms of, like, the growing gap between the rights and privileges of people who are the most wealthy and successful and, like, those at the bottom.
Right.
Comparing it to feudalism. Basically, we're the serfs. And Jeff Bezos is a hassle, I guess. It's mostly an economic concept, I think.
Didn't the serfs have it pretty alright, though? For the most part?
I mean, yeah, I think so, relatively. It's better than, like... Being a serf would be better than, like, not, right? Unless you're some rugged individualist. If all you're trying to do is, like, farm, feed your family, and, you know, have some kids or whatever, then you might as well... It's probably better to be a serf than anything else.
I guess.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, because, like, didn't they end up, like, working way less than we work now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Into, like... I really... I want to remember. I think it would be extremely enlightening to do, like, a video on the myth of, like, how easy workers have it now, because I don't want to incorrectly cite, but the gist of it is that, like, some of these historical scholars have went back and compared, like, some of these calendars that these ancient workers and shit used, like, and they said, oh, this is the time we took off and all that kind of stuff, and it's like night and day, like, up until, like, 1800, or maybe a little bit before that, like 1600 or whatever. But for the great majority of, like, the early and Middle Ages or whatever, like, they worked tiny amounts compared. Like, the idea of 1 week off a year is, like, not, like, they'd have months and months off and shit.
Right. Well, because they couldn't work in the winter.
Yeah, well, and when you're not generating capital, like, capital to put on your capital stack, like when you're farming, right?
Yeah.
The king might say, okay, I want you to pay more food tax or whatever, because but then as a serfs, you can be like, well, we have enough to, like, pay our regular taxes, feed our families, and, like, our whole community and everything.
Right.
So we're taking extra time off. And then, of course, like, religious holidays and stuff, too. Like, you take a week off, a couple weeks off for Christmas and everything else.
Right.
But it's interesting. I want to find the actual studies and stuff, but it's eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah. It's almost as if the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been disastrous for the human race.
Poor Ted.
I don't know. I don't know about poor Ted, but...
Was the manifesto the first TED Talk?
Maybe that's why they call it TED Talks.
Maybe. The widening of the wealth gap as poor and marginalized people are excluded from the state's provision of security can result in neo-feudalism, argues Marina Caparini, who says this has already happened in South Africa. Neo-feudalism is made possible by the commodification of policing. It signifies the end of shared citizenship, says Ian Loader. So it's not really a robot. It's more like a... It's almost like a way to complain about how bad shit is. It's like this is new feudalism now. Basically. Not even saying they're not right to complain, but...
Feudalism 2, electric boogaloo.
It's not a fleshed out concept as much as it is a relational criticism of like modern economics and shit, I think. Refeudalization. Jim Crow economy.
What?
I'm just looking at the related articles to neo-feudalism. Were you looking at proto-feudalism? What was that? Anything interesting there?
Basically, it was mostly relating to Spain and how like the Visigoths started to break up their land usage into like vassalages and whatnot, and that's why they argue that's why they were able to be taken over by the Moors.
I've always from the first time I heard the word Visigoth, I'm like, that's one of the coolest words that exists.
It is kind of.
It's like sick. That's a sick ass word.
The Visigoths were cool.
I know.
You know, they like sacked Rome and shit.
There's some reading about it. Some of the English serfs, and it's a little bit less hot than I remembered. A little less desirable to be a serf than I remembered.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I wouldn't want to be a serf. I just mean like.
No, it had no rights over their own bodies. Cannot leave the land they were bound to. So that's where the freedom thing comes in. I mean, you have to like get out of the kingdom. But,
yeah, didn't they have to like run away? They had to like run away and then be gone for what, like 2 to 6 years or something like that.
You know how like in Monopoly, if I want to like trade property or sell you a property, like you get the houses that are on it.
Yeah,
it's like that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's.
No, I know.
I'm just explaining it for the viewers.
Yeah, and I just mean like
they were attached to the land, pretty much.
Yeah, but they could like run away, and they, as long as they weren't caught for what was it, like 6 years or something like that.
I'm not sure.
Then they could they were.
So basically, if you became your life situation became too shitty, you basically like, I guess I got to become a serf now, and then all future property you would get, and then all your kids would be, the property would be belong to the person your serfdom was to, and then your children would also be serfs.
Right.
By the Lord before whom the sanctuary is holy, I will to blank to be true and faithful, and love all which he loves, and shun all which he shuns, according to the laws of God and the order of the world. Nor will I ever, with will or action, through word or deed, do anything which is unpleasing to him, on condition that he will hold to me as I shall deserve it, and that he will perform everything as it was in our agreement when I submitted myself to him and chose his will.
Yeah, but at least they weren't like getting beaten, right?
Sometimes they could.
Oh.
They had no right to not be. They had no rights over their own bodies.
Oh, right.
So they.
Yeah, I mean, serfdom sounds slightly better than chattel slavery.
Slightly, yeah. Most of the global, or like most of the different laws throughout the world that relate to slavery and like the shit from coalitions of nations and like the UN, that the language they use to to disavow slavery and say that it's a violation of human rights basically relate to serfdom too. Like they include tenets that would be serfdom in their clauses.
Right.
Yeah. Whipping was a common punishment for Russian serfs. I got the emancipation dates of serfdom in various countries. And some of the more recent ones are Afghanistan, 1923. Bhutan, I guess. Bhutan. Officially abolished by 1959. I'm not familiar with wherever that's at. And then Tibet, 1959, but the use of serf for Tibet is controversial. Which I'm not sure the exact details of that, but Tibet and China have a, let's call it, rocky relationship, so I'm not surprised that there's always debate about Tibet in relation to China and all this other shit. But Congress, Poland, 1864, Hawaii, 1835. But mostly it was, they were all abolished by late 1700s, early 1800s.
Right.
And most of them were, a lot of them were out of date by then anyway, but they were like formally on.
Right.
It's funny to me how, like, as the end of this kind of political system happens, like in that era, that's when the idea of it becomes like a thing. Like once you're about 100 years out from like feudalism, 100 to 200 years out from feudalism and serfdom actually being a thing, that's when like academic feudalism starts to appear as like a concept. But I can definitely see why, like, the use has fallen out of favor a little bit just because it's clearly it's a nebula. You have to look at like each country and era as its own thing for the most part.
Right.
Just cause it's not like there was a unifying, like we said before, there's not a unifying concept between all of them. It's just they're all broadly similar, so you can call them feudalism, I guess, whatever. And I feel like some of these neo-feudalism, I saw re-feudalism, where they're like political theorists will criticize like neoliberal globalization and privatization of shit like water and food on like a global scale as like re-feudalism. Like, I mean, I guess I have to read their shit in depth to like formally criticize it, but it just seems like it's using a popular but also nebulously useful term in order to like make some broad criticism about how shitty global capitalism is. But you don't gotta call it feudalism for that to be true, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I wasn't aware. That's the main thing that I became aware of now doing this research, was that it's actually way more nebulous of a concept and not generally regarded as useful as a term before. Because they taught it to us when I was learning history. I was taught.
Yeah, we were taught like
it's definitely like that was the thing.
Yeah, feudalism was the thing. I mean, and then we were taught about feudal Japan and feudal China.
I guess I knew like deep down it wasn't like an ideology or like political system writ large, but I just figured it was like it was more.
I mean, it was a societal structure.
Yeah. I thought it was just more substantive as a
term. As
a political system than it really is, which is just, I think the truth of it is, like we mentioned before, there's something inherent in how humans form societies that like they go through a feudalistic process, it seems like, unless they're like fast tracked to becoming more advanced for whatever reason. But yeah.
I mean, I guess the Black Death kind of helped destroy the feudal system a little bit.
Yeah, well, just because it fucking killed so many fucking people that this shit wouldn't, you had to like figure something new out.
Right.
You got to get down and dirty a little bit.
Well, maybe a little bit down and clean.
Yeah. Had a lot less serfs to work with.
Right.
How much did the Black Death like differentially affect like the nobility and the poor? I mean, obviously most people were poor, so most of them were.
Well, I mean,
but like, did 2/3 of nobility who die too? You know what I mean? I'm not sure. I just don't know. It's been a while. It's been a long time since I've read up very much about the Black Death. I mean, the most recent thing I've learned about it is just like it's the Bubonic Plague.
Yeah. So the overwhelming of the large death toll on the nobles wasn't labor shortages.
Okay.
So basically what would happen would be the serfs would all get the plague and die, and then there'd be nobody there to work the farms, so like the noble would end up like either starving to death or just destitute.
Incredible.
I mean, that's kind of what happens when your like whole societal structure is based upon like the exploitation of free labor.
Yeah. Go fucking figure, right?
Right.
The Black Death was based? Question mark?
Pretty much.
Alright, next time on Master Debaters.